It's a rock. Couldn't think of another intro.
Rock.
Rocks is a British-made social realist drama directed by Sarah Gavron, which premiered in 2019. The film's title is the nickname of our central character, Rocks, who is a teenage girl who is forced to look after herself and her little brother Emmanuel after their mother abandons them with limited cash in their London flat in Hackney. Rocks then has to look after Emmanuel and keep them both fed and well, whilst also attending her all-girls secondary school. And so the film basically shows Rocks struggle on a daily basis to care for Emmanuel, a brother who's quite a bit younger than her and is a handful. And she looks after him when he's not at school and tries to feed him and provide for him, but at the same time is just trying to have her own life in school, make friends and do as best she can in class, even though she's crushed by the grief and anxiety of her mother running away. This film is pretty quintessential social realist drama for Britain. It's funded by the BFI and Film 4 has got an unknown British cast, and it focuses on racial and social issues in the Hackney area of London. And whilst also being a social realist film that tackles British racial and cultural issues, it's also a coming of age film focusing on a group of young girls of varying ethnic backgrounds. And for those reasons, it reminds one of Girlhood, a French film that came out a few years ago, directed by Sienne Sciamma, I think is how you pronounce her name, who was like risen to fame recently after directing a portrait of a lady on fire. And so the film explores two things very well. The dynamic of a poor group of girlfriends in London, and then the social and racial issues that are present in Hackney and that come to the fore when Rox is abandoned by her mother. One thing that I really like about this film is something that good social realist films should do, and that's subtle direction. So in like social realist films by like Ken Loach and other famous British filmmakers, they're meant to film these poor or ethnically diverse people from like quite an impartial stance, just show their problems and let you make up your own thoughts and feelings about what's going on screen. But there's subtle shots in this film that, if you pay attention, convey meaning. Like, for example, there's static shots of London, these great skyscrapers, and the girls playing on rooftops, and they're in the background, and it's sort of this huge city's there, but it's also the wealth attached to that city's unattainable for them. There's also beautiful pans between characters which convey meaning, like when two characters are on either side of a sheet of glass and the camera pans, showing that there's some sort of issue between those two characters. The film's directed beautifully in that way, that it's showing you what's happening in these social issues in a pretty plain manner, but if you pay attention, the way the camera presents certain things gives you added meaning in a very effective way. And I quite like direction like that, directing that has subtle meaning but doesn't broadcast the meaning. The director's not going, look at me, I'm making meaning with my shots here. They just present the actors with subtle inflections in camera movements that if you pay attention and pick up on, there's deeper things going on within the shot. Another big pro of this film is that the cast is amazing in how believable they are. I think all of the young girls in this film are non-professional actors or first-time actors, and they all do an incredible job. I've always found that side of this style of film quite interesting when you make the decision as a director or producer that you're going to use non-professional actors. The casting process to find someone who's never acted before on screen and find people good enough to convey the sort of characters you want to convey. I don't know how people go about doing that. It's a very interesting process, and they do nail it because all of these girls feel like they're exactly from the streets that we're seeing in this film, and many of them are in actual life. The producers of this film actually talked to the producers of other great social realist films, which are British, that have been made in the last 10 years, such as Fish Tank and American Honey. And so they were clearly well trained in how to spot young people who would suit this film and the screen very well. The whole group of young girlfriends, the performances in them are excellent, but what has to be noted are the two leads, which I have their names written down because I'm terrible at remembering names. Kosa Ali and Buka Bakara. I'm sorry, I'm so trash at pronouncing foreign names. Their two central performances in this film are so naturalistic and astounding. There's very few scenes of loud acting in this film where like a character will fall to their knees and cry uncontrollably. It's very nuanced, believable acting, but then when there are those emotional sequences call for that sort of acting, these two girls do an absolutely fantastic job. Not only is the directing very nuanced in how it presents this whole world, but the script's very nuanced for how it explores different racial and ethnic groups and how there's harmony between those groups, but also quite a bit of hostility. We get Nigerians in this film, we get Muslims from Somalia, I think is the ethnic background of those groups. And then there's also poor white people who interact with these girls or within this school. And so it presents London very honestly as this melting pot of different races and cultures, but doesn't shy away from any of the issues that arise. And it presents all these groups with honesty, and the interactions between them are very interesting. And so the film explores the reality of these different ethnicities interacting together. And although some of the stuff you see has been explored before, it's presenting this film with great honesty, and it never feels like a cliche, any of the racial drama that happens within this film. Whilst the film at times is very heavy and sad because it's exploring how helpless some of these young girls are, the film also has a great warmth and vibrancy to it because of the chemistry that these young girls have. And we get sequences of them laughing and dancing and filming TikToks together. And these scenes really bring a lot of levity to the film, which is needed because it's exploring some very heavy topics. The film captures the interaction of these girls so well, and all the drama feels very real and very important to them. The film doesn't have quite the dramatic weight as some other coming of age dramas. Girlhood is a bit more engaging for the drama aspects. So is mid-90s, as I've talked about before. It's a bit more gripping in the aspects of the child interactions and the dramas between them. And I think the reason the interactions of these girls falls a little bit short is because of the script. When the girls are all together and interacting, the scenes are normally montages or quite sparing with the dialogue. We'll normally just have montages of them dancing or playing. And so it would have been nice to have more sequences with more heavy dialogue between these young people, so that we get a feel for each character a bit more. I praise mid-90s so much because of how well the dialogue captured that group and how extensive the dialogue scenes were with these young people. I think this film could have benefited a bit more from that. So while these montage sequences where we see the group bonding are very effective, it would have been good to have some more effective dialogue. There are sequences in this film where the girls really open up to one another, and there are some very good, very well written dramatic sequences, but the script doesn't quite do the groundwork of building up a really layered social sphere of these girls. You sort of just see them interact, and I would have just appreciated a bit more dialogue to enter their world a bit more immersively. But that's a minor flaw, and for the most part, you're really engaged when watching these girls interact. Another big plus of the film for me was the ending. I sometimes find the ending of social realist films quite dull and flat because you basically know where these sorts of stories are going when they're dealing with social issues of poor people in London. And you have an expectation of where this film's going to go by about the midpoint. But the ending is surprisingly mature and harsh and surprised me, but it's still got a good sense of warmth and levity to it because of the vibrant chemistry that these girls have. And so the casting in this film is really a great plus and what carries a lot of the film. Also, I've got to give the film big thumbs up for ending in Hastings. Not a little bit of a spoiler there, but the final scene is in Hastings, where your homeboy lives. And yeah, it's always nice to see where you live on screen. Although, of course, you then do fall into that thing of you're watching the final sequence of this film and it edits between different streets and they're meant to be walking from point A to point B and they jump locations and you're like, that street's a good 20 miles from that street. And so they've just walked it in connection to this other place that's about 30 miles over there. And you're like, well, it's nice to see it on screen, but I guess poetic licensing will let it pass. I often find social realist films very heavy and a bit of a drag and a bit of a chore to watch, but this one had great energy, honesty. It did a lot. It had restrained but layered aspects in both its script and its direction. Minor flaws would be I would have liked a slightly stronger script, having said that. But overall, this was a really great film, and if people want to watch a drama about the current social issues in London, I think this would be a very good choice. Yay!